You've already likely seen the news stories. Earlier this month, President Trump signed an executive order halting federal funding for PBS and NPR. That includes us here at Austin PBS. The White House argues that taxpayer money should not go to what they describe as biased reporting and, quote, woke propaganda disguised as news. While the decision came as a blow, it did not come as a surprise. The situation is ongoing. Joining us now to help us better understand what's going on here is the CEO of Austin PBS, Luis Patiño. Luis, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Laura, for having me.
Well, Luis, what's been the reaction to this news from PBS so far?
Well, I think we've had reactions that have come in phases, right? I think the original action that was that really started to come in as a result of the DOJ subcommittee hearings was sort of one set of reactions around, really, was it really needed, truly needed to have a DOJ subcommittee hearing with both CEO of PBS and NPR? That certainly had some interesting reaction to it. Then the executive order came down. That had reaction, many people reaching out to us in support of what we do, especially here in Austin. But I think that the biggest reaction that we had was over this past weekend, because the Department of Education just cut some significant amount of funding for PBS Kids content and services to the tune of $23 million across the country. Here in Austin, it also affected some of the work that we do around our Ready to Learn program. So that has to do with educational outreach programs that we do for pre-K children, kindergarten children. So that's content and services that directly affect us. In Austin, that's roughly $350,000. And then across the state, you can add a little bit more to that. But that really caused some major outrage, because if there's anything that people truly are reminded of when they think about PBS and public media, it's the services and the content that we have provided for over 60 years to their children.
It's PBS Kids, simple as that. It's
That's
inextricable
right.
from all the work that we've done for the community and PBS has done. And that's a double whammy, you know, the potential loss of federal funding, and
That's
then you
right.
mentioned the Department of Education. So how could the slashing of both of these fund sources impact Austin PBS directly?
Well, if you think about any business, whether you're a large corporation or a small business here in town, if they slash 10% of your annual revenues, which is what is at stake for Austin PBS. Roughly 10% of our total operating budget has the potential to be gone should the federal funding go away. Then you tack on top of that the dollars that we just talked about that came from the Department of Education, and that adds, we get closer to 12%. So take away 12% of anybody's annual revenues, and they just cannot continue to operate in the same fashion. So it will not be status quo. What does that exactly mean in detail? We don't know yet. But I think, unfortunately, everything needs to be re-examined. Everything from programming, from services, just some of the content that we've been thinking about providing, some of the events that we produce. So it really makes us have to go back and reevaluate everything in a manner that really shouldn't have to happen. And also, when you think about that, those dollars are used in such an efficient manner. Right? The way that we are able to operate at Austin PBS and the things that we're able to produce just could not be done in the commercial media world. So as somebody who comes from the commercial media world, I can tell you we are extremely efficient in the work that we do and that we provide for the community.
And it's great you bring that up, because I know the commercial media framework is also changing. I too come from that world, and the beautiful thing about PBS is a lot of stations that are that serve areas that are unreachable oftentimes by these commercial stations, and those could potentially shutter in totality because of this.
Exactly. No, that's a really good point, and I think that we're definitely concerned here, Austin PBS, our colleagues at KUT, KUTX, right? But we are extremely blessed to live in a city like Austin. If you think about some of the other markets that are sort of the more rural stations, whether they're radio or television stations, many of them are in markets where they are literally the only news source in town. We've heard this concept that we've termed news deserts. Well, they exist, and they exist partially because in the commercial media world, it just doesn't really pay. The business model doesn't hold to have a full-blown television or radio station in Marfa, Texas, for example. But we have an amazing NPR station in Marfa that does great work with very few people, huge impact for the West Texas community. A station like that is very much at risk because of the disproportionate amount of money that they receive from the federal government. The same holds true for the Corpus Christi PBS station. Our stations in the Permian Basin, Midland, Odessa, Amarillo. So there's a lot of stations, even here in Texas, that would be severely at risk should this federal funding go away. Not to mention all the things that that federal funding also pays for, which is primarily the stations, but there's also a lot of infrastructure that allows us to have as a system-wide 330 PBS station organization. Obviously, there's a lot of infrastructure needed for that.
And to note, this federal funding roughly amounts to about $1.60 per taxpayer. So really not that much in the grand scheme of things per taxpayer.
And that's why I talk about the efficiency, right? Again, $1.60 pays for 330 television stations, PBS stations, over 1,200 NPR stations across the country. That's pretty efficient utilization of $1.60, less than a cup of coffee. People remind me it's a lot less than a cup of coffee.
These days, yeah, or like five times less.
But it's extremely efficient. And when you look at the overall budget, I think it's 0.001. You can fact check me on that, but it's, I think, 0.001 of the total national budget. So we're not talking about huge dollars. And I get the conversation around where people want their tax dollars spent. But if you talk about it from an efficiency point of view, from a community impact point of view, there is nothing better than public media and what we have been doing for over 60 years.
And with these potential cuts looming, how do you foresee PBS making up for that potentially? And what's next for PBS?
Yeah. Well, I think that what is next for us right now in the immediate future is to really ask that our community really stand with us right now. There is a website that between PBS and NPR and some of our national organizations, we all collaborated to create the website that's called Protect My Public Media. That website allows for our community members to go onto that website, put in their information, your zip code primarily, and that immediately signals which congressional district you belong to, who your elected official is. All you have to put in is really your basic information. I think it just asks for your name, your zip code, and it automatically sends a letter to your congressional district representative telling them to support public media, to support their local PBS station, their local NPR station in their respective market. And I think that right now, the more that we can get our community to stand with us, at the end of the day, that is what has always been one of the beauties of public media, is that we've always had bipartisan support across the country, because people realize that there may be one conversation happening in Washington, D.C., but when you get back to Austin, when you get back to Amarillo, when you get back to Midland, Odessa, your community speaks very loudly about their interest and their support of public media, and therefore those elected officials know that.
And you bring this up, but even though this is a tenuous time undoubtedly for PBS, it has been heartening to see how many people are coming out of the woodwork to support and really love on PBS right now. In the middle of all this, do you foresee maybe a rise in first-time donors or new donors giving more than they ever have because of the situation? Yeah,
absolutely. We've definitely seen a lift of people reaching out and wanting to become members of Austin PBS and wanting to support us in different ways. And I think that's what's important, right? Obviously, as a nonprofit media organization, it is really important for us to have that support, that philanthropic support from our community. But even almost equally as important is the engagement, right? We want new audiences to discover PBS programming, to discover our shows, some of the new shows, to rediscover some of the programs that we have had for years, right? Just last year, we celebrated 50 years of Austin City Limits. I think people realize now more than ever that a program like Austin City Limits would never have survived in the private sector, right? Something would have happened one year, the ratings would have declined, and somebody would have decided to cancel it, right? One of the only reasons, and I believe firmly in this, one of the only reasons that Austin City Limits was able to survive for 50 years is because it lived inside of the public media sector. And you had 330 stations willing to run it, willing to support it, and people across the country that loved what they saw when they would turn on Austin City Limits. And think about what it did for our city.
Absolutely. Without it, would we even have the reputation to the degree we have of the live music capital of the world?
Yeah, maybe not.
Oh, that'd be a sad situation, a sad state of things. Well, Luis, during this tenuous time, thank you so much for coming on and helping us better understand and breaking down the situation. We'll have to see it all play out.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.